Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. Every business wants to maximize profit, and the only way to do that is to first optimize your people in a low friction context. Twice a month, we bring you people out there in the world doing really cool work that is helping all of us to create that revenue culture. We broadcast these twice a month. And of course, they live for a very long time out there in the cloud someplace so that you can pass them on and let other people learn from them as well. Today, my guest is Tariq Alinur, and you're going to find this is one of the most interesting podcasts we've done in a long time. Uh, Tariq is the CEO of BrainCX, a leading creator, maybe the leading creator in the world's first AI conversational voice platform. And I've watched it, and it's hard to believe it's not a real live human being out there doing this. One of the things to me that was fascinating, and hopefully Tariq will talk about it, is they they can clone or copy or learn from your best of your best, like in a call center or in a customer service, and they add that to the AI, which I find just fascinating because we often struggle with why is one good and not the other. And
Mm.
so he's going to show us how to learn from that. And it's a conversational voice platform that clones top performing staff. And it's really quite fascinating. So, welcome, Tariq.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here.
Well, when I saw what you do and had the chance to, kind of engage with it a little bit, it, it's one of those things that you kind of dream about or you think about, or while you're having beers with guys, you talk about it, but you're not sure it's ever going to be real. So, first, please tell us about your background, and then we're going to talk about what you're actually doing.
Great. Well, thanks, Rick, for Rick for having me on. You know, Thomas Friedman wrote a book. It was called "The World Is Flat" several years ago, and I had an opportunity to really capture that firsthand. Back in the '90s, I founded India's first BPO company, a company called First Ring, which later became First Source, which was a publicly traded company.
Mhm.
And then I led JP Morgan's expansion into the Philippines. We actually won the JD Powers Award while I was there and became the largest employer there in the Philippines. It's phenomenal what's happened there. I mean, they have over 20,000 employees there today. I came back home after being an expat for a number of years, and I went to work for Apple, helping them set up tech support centers. We had 5 here in the US. And then I became a world traveler. I went to China, France, Brazil, Malaysia, and the Philippines, and built world-class contact centers for them. So it was one of the greatest times of my life working for a very premier brand and doing something really cool, getting to visit a lot of great places. And then, one of the things I realized over the decades of doing this is that I noticed something. Customer service hasn't really evolved. And, we're all tired of those frustrating press one, press two IVRs. That's why I started BrainCX. As the CEO, I'm committed to transforming customer interactions with conversational voice AI that replicates the DNA of top sales agents and service agents. We're not just improving customer service, we're boosting sales and customer lifetime value while cutting costs. And let's face it, who wouldn't want to say goodbye to those endless automated menus? And with BrainCX, we're making customer service feel like a conversation with your best friend, just without the awkward small talk. So
Huh.
that's what we do. Yeah.
Wow. As you were talking, it kind of brain explosion moment. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, I had the chance to be part of the teams that literally created all of that computer integrated telephony that created all those IVRs and all those those people who call you at 5 o'clock just as you're sitting down for dinner. And, uh,
Yeah.
at the time we were creating it, I didn't realize what it was going to become. But as I'm listening to you, I hear the evolution of where it's become, which is probably not where a lot of us appreciate it. And yet I've seen what you're doing with it, which takes it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
So, tell us exactly, what uh, BrainCX does and how it does it and who it does it for.
Yeah, so our purpose is to help brands scale the experience that already works, the experience your team. So every customer is able to interact with the best employee in your company. And that at the highest level is the way to think about it. So we work on behalf of many call centers and brands that have either sales that they're trying to drive, whether that be inbound or outbound, or service environments, technical support environments, even supporting in-house teams like service technicians when they're out there in the field. And the way we do that is by ingesting large amounts of data around the business, large amounts of data of who the best people are that do this. And we learn from that, and we learn all the attributes and skills, so much so that many times we'll actually use the name and the voice of those best agents. And what we found, we all relate to people we can, see the same in. And so, for example, I have a member of my team named Caleb. He has a Tennessee accent. When he speaks to someone in Tennessee, they will dig Caleb. And so we've learned that,
Interesting.
when people interact with voices that are familiar with them, we believe that the conversion will be higher, the service will be better. And I think we've all become very accustomed now to offshore call centers and all the dynamics
Yeah.
around that. But think about being able to do that at the fraction of the cost using the same skills or even better skills with voices that are very regional in nature. That's what we're building for companies.
You're again, my brain's spinning. You mentioned Caleb, and um, I guess I'm imagining, knowing what I used to know about call centers, when you hear an inbound voice, can you then decide whether it's a Tennessee response or a New England response or New York?
It's getting there. We're fairly close to that. There's a lot of brands out there. There's some really cool technology that looks at customer data and sort of looks at regionally where you're calling from. Or if we already know who you are, we can use tools to sort of, simulate what would the best experience would be for you. And so, based on that, or even based on the conversation, the AI could speed up or slow down their conversation. If you're calling from the north, you're from New York, those damn Yankees don't like to speak to us Southerners that may speak a little slower. And
Yeah.
so the AI would adjust its pace and speak a little faster in that scenario. It may adjust to your pace and how you speed and your cadence or the tone. So there's a lot of very unique things we can do. But here's the coolest part of this. We recently tested this with a company that's into therapy, online therapy.
Yeah.
We called it their customer service, and the agent was so busy having to fill out information and looking up information. And we mentioned just to test this that, we're suffering with anxiety. The agent didn't recognize that, didn't say anything, and got us the information. That call took 13 minutes. We did that same phone call using our our conversational voice AI. Not only was it more empathetic and thoughtful in its response, acknowledged the fact that we said anxiety, but it also handled that interaction about 30% faster than the call center agent did. And so these tools are great because they're listening, they're responding. All the work that they need to do is being done in milliseconds in the background. And so the irony to this is that you may actually end up with a better conversation with your customer using this tool than perhaps, an agent who may be burnt out or just trying to get something done that they're required to get filled in.
Um, the cost accountant in me is going crazy here. Um, you know, one of the things we always ask our guests is talk about the value that you transfer, but normally we're asking you how do you make your client's world more valuable? But in the example you just gave, you're making your client's world more valuable and making their client's world safer, happier, more valuable, all at the same time. Is am I getting that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of intrinsic value. Not, companies measure something called NPS, the Net Promoter Score. Would I recommend them? I believe that if you can create a frictionless experience where someone's not on hold waiting to speak to an agent, and you can do that in a conversational style, and complete a task in a friendly, engaging, and naturally human sounding way, inherently, I believe that the NPS score would be higher. Your loyalty score would definitely be higher. And all the value around driving future revenue would inherently be better. And we believe that that's where it starts. It's being able to drive those subtle interactions we have day in and day out with customers.
I'm going way beyond that. Just the last few years, I've had the opportunity to work with some really great companies in the assessment space, and I'm thinking about the example of the that you just gave of the client, where the person calling in, um, you know, has some kind of anxiety or they're in some kind of trauma, and first, when somebody listens or is perceived as listening and hears what they're saying and handles it quicker as opposed to adding more complexity and more chaos and more confusion. I'm just wondering if that doesn't have both short term and long term financial returns. And the other thing that's going on in my head is, and when you said if we know who's calling, for a lot of organizations, if we know who's calling, we may actually know their preferred way. And you said it, but
Yeah.
speak faster or, ask more questions or, if we understand their preferred way to communicate through some type of assessment or historical data, that probably makes them stickier. It probably gets to the solution faster. It probably makes them much more of a great referral source proactively without us having to ask. I'm just imagining applying what you say, what you're bringing to the market with BrainCX versus same kind of business situation without that. I got to believe there's a measurable financial difference.
It has to be. And, when a conversation is contextual and relevant, I think one of the things that happens so often is we get transferred around to different people. You have to say your story over and over again. We hate that, obviously. But imagine a world where when you call, the AI already knows every interaction you've had with that brand. And in fact, it may have the same voice that you've heard the last time, speaking to you in the way that's best for you. Now think about that personalization of that service. That's great. I mean, today we're so used to very, dysfunctional ways of handling these calls. But if you can have very personalized service, I'd have to think your loyalty level would increase. And I think, from a CMO seat where they're struggling to increase customer lifetime value, right? Through retention. Anything that can do that to allow you to increase the loyalty of that hard to acquire customer, I think you should be looking at that. And that's what I believe this tool can do for you.
Now, one of the things you and I talked a little bit about the other day, um, I see people who are excited about talking to AI. Sometimes they're excited because they think it's really cool, and
Yeah.
sometimes they're excited because I don't want to talk to a robot, but I guess I'd like you to give your insights in how are we as consumers or businesses making the adjustment because we're going to be talking to machines or systems or something, and we do already, press
Yeah.
one for this and two for that. We're already doing it, but is there an emotional component or am I just overreacting? And what do you think that's going to look like over the next couple, 3 years?
I would say this, it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when. And so to your point, we are all used to dealing with IVRs, which is these IVRs are not AI driven. They're inherently
Oh,
trying to figure out why you're calling. That's why they're asking you to press one or two. But imagine that scenario where someone calls and says, "Thank you for calling. How may I help you?" Instead of saying para español, press two. Depending on the language you speak now, it can start conversing to you in the language of choice. And to your question about, will people inherently like this better or will they become used to it? There's some secrets or things that I think really differentiate BrainCX and our IP over others that may be out there. I think we're used to IVRs, which take time to respond. And not to get too technical, but what happens is that many of these tools that are out there, they still take anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 milliseconds to digest what you've said and to respond back. We've gotten that down to 300 milliseconds, human conversations at 250. So we are very, very close. And when you're having a conversation that's fluid, and it's what's called turn taking, you speak, then I
yeah.
speak
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
do that because we can do that so well that I think people forget that it's not a human being. In fact, most cases they really don't know. And when we look back statistically at all the thousands of conversations we have daily, it's less than a fraction of 1% of the customers that have actually asked, is this a real person or is it an AI? It's so rare that that happens. And I think it's because we've gotten the tool so dialed in that it's that good.
I don't know who I was talking to the other day, but um, the conversation was excellent. And it was so excellent. I was sure I was talking to AI, but it was that good an experience. And you just, I thank you for this. You use the "May I help you," which grammatically is correct. 9 out of 10 people, "Can I help you?" And I have no
Yeah.
idea if they can help me or not. But if they
Yeah.
can't, they shouldn't be answering the phone. Um,
Right.
so I mean, so many of the things that are, I think, important to a lot of us. And as you were talking about the time between the calls, I can imagine if it's 2 or 3 years from now, the AI will even know my preference for speed. My wife always teases me that I take a breath in my conversations, and as soon as I do, she inserts something.
Yeah.
But she hasn't figured out that I like to be reflective in my conversation.
Right.
And so I got to get AI to train her so we talk better.
Well, I think there's what we call the science of communication, right? Understanding the archetype of the person you're speaking with. And as these tools start to understand you, it can adjust exactly that. Do you speak faster or slower? But also, there is times, depending on your mood, if you're starting to speak more aggressively or if you're upset, the
Yep.
tool needs to know how to respond to that and not just be a generic conversation. I think we're only about 6 months to a year away from what I would call real agentic AI, which is AI that's at the human level of conversation and thought. We are that close. And the interesting thing is that people seem to think that these tools are good at very routine, day-to-day task and FAQ type questions. Well, we challenge that thinking. We deliberately started with highly regulated industries, really complex industries. And because we believe that if we can do that in these very difficult, high stake type conversations, then everything else becomes a lot
Yeah.
easier. And so, that's been a deliberate approach in our business model. And our biggest clients are in the healthcare sector, also in the higher education sector, where we're helping students
Mm.
find and make decisions about courses and education products. Sometimes they're paying 30, 40, $80,000 for these degree programs. and we're taking them through that entire journey. That's not an easy conversation, but we are able to do that using AI in a very sophisticated and natural way.
Wow. The other thing I just can't get out of my head as I'm listening and having, kind of experienced how well you guys do this today. I'm imagining when I deal with a company on a regular basis, whether it's ordering product or whatever it is that I do on a
Yeah.
regular occurrence, I can imagine I'd like to ask for certain uh, AI representatives that I happen to click with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can imagine you branding. There's a Rick, and there's a Tariq, and there's a Sally, and there's a Alice. And, when you call in, I want to talk to Alice. And that's one of your options
Well,
because, yeah.
definitely. And what imagine there's some brands that have characters and personalities. Think about calling Disney World and getting your choice of interacting with Mickey or Donald, right?
Oh, I
That
want Goofy.
Yeah, yeah, me too. So yeah, I don't think we're far off from that. In fact, we've actually built some of these just in our laboratory to see what that would sound like. But there are voices that are inherent to brands. Imagine calling your favorite brand and interacting with that voice. That would be pretty cool.
Well, and, as you're building in the, um, where the AI understands how I like to communicate, or when I finish a call with a good AI system, I want to say thank you. And
Yeah,
of course, I know the person at the other end does, or the respondent at the other side doesn't care about that, but I care about it.
yeah.
I want to express the fact I appreciated what they did. And so if, they get to know me, and, they know last week I was at a birthday party for a grandkid, and they bring it up, I was the party, that's super cool.
That would be great. Yeah, you just gave me some thinking there. I mean, if we were to relate the next conversation back to a prior conversation with subtle things like that, that would be really cool.
Well, it would,
Clever.
at
Yeah,
least the human in me, that's really, it's an experience that is important.
that's right. That's right. It's
It,
personalized experience. And, I think that we should have the ability to choose to interact with our brands in the channel of choices, right? So some people may choose to never speak to another just by text messaging or what have you. And I certainly agree that there's, a need for all of these. But at the end of the day, when we are facing complex things or problems in our lives, I still lean into we want to do that through a voice conversation. If I'm heading to the airport, trying to check in, and I've got the kids in the background and so on, the last thing I want to do is be texting someone. But if I can have that contextual voice conversation, that's a much better experience.
well, and the other thing that I keep thinking about is what you do scales.
Yes, unlimited.
And when,
Yeah.
I have a particular airline I fly a lot, and I know they're a low budget carrier, but they happen to fly exactly the places I want to go
Right.
at a very low fare. And most of the time, they're wonderful. But every now and then, I need to talk to somebody. And when that happens, they're horrible. And I know why they're horrible. It's expensive, and most of us who are airline passengers have dumb questions, and we don't know what we don't know, and we're hoping the agent's way smarter than we are and going to solve all the problems. But that's not normal. And so I can see just, when all of a sudden I have a death in the family and I need to change my flight, and I don't want to have to train the agent to solve my problem. I just want a capable, competent, rapid solution. I can see that's something you can help with.
Well, give you one more example. In fact, my last profession before I joined, started BrainCX was in the airline industry. And one of the typical challenges we faced in the airline was what we call an IROP, an irregular operation event. And that's, as an example, a snowstorm happens and flight gets canceled. Now
Yep.
you have hundreds of people calling to reschedule a flight. Well, the airline can't have that many people just stand by waiting. Now imagine if that conversation, when you're calling to rebook, can be done through a voice conversation immediately without having to wait. And the airline could scale up and scale down quickly with this AI and not have to spend a penny more to do that. That's a much better interaction than sitting there waiting, 30 minutes or longer for someone to become available.
Yeah, and I can imagine again a year, maybe it's tomorrow, but a year or so out, if I'm calling my airline and I've flown well over 4 million miles, so I've been through these kinds of situations where whatever reason something cancels and it doesn't, often it cancels 10 flights.
Yep,
And that's 1,500 people. And, all of a sudden they're all dialing the same number, all suffering with the same problem. And the AI could know I'm on that plane and that plane's been canceled. And it could be prepared for me as soon as they get me on the line.
that's right.
And I don't call the airlines or the banks or my credit cards or for tech support unless it's unique. If it's simple, I already know how to do it. And
Yeah,
so I need somebody who's got a real deep answer for me, or I wouldn't have called.
that's right. And, I often tell people though, it's funny because a year ago we couldn't do what we do today.
Yeah,
AI has evolved that quickly. And so, as much as we wanted to have that level of intelligence and the ability to handle complex conversations like this, the reality is that that just didn't exist a year or 2 years ago when a lot of these IVRs were built with the environment that they were given. Again, I think in the next 6 months to a year, it's going to be fascinating to see how much this technology will continue to evolve and just because, just build greater, better experiences for everyone.
yeah. So Tariq, a lot of the people that watch these podcasts don't own an airline or a pharma or something like that.
Yep.
So to what extent is this capability available for the small medium enterprise, or should startups be thinking about this from day one?
I'll give you an example. I mean, there's a lot of startups that are out there. There's a company called Breeze Airlines that started out where, a few years ago, and from day one, they wanted to be digital first. This is exactly how they wanted to start. And the reality is the cost for this AI solution is a fractional cost to what you would pay for a full-time North American agent. So you definitely will be saving money, and it makes sense to start from that approach. But if you have any desire to grow your business, which I think everyone does,
Yeah,
I think you should start with an AI first approach. I believe that not only is it going to give contextually and consistent better service, you can do this in multiple languages. Spanish is a growing market here in the US. That's inevitable. You can use Spanish, French, Creole. I mean, you name it, you can do that from day one. And you can offer 24/7 service. And that, I struggle to think how many brands lose sales because they're not available. And you probably measure this in your world, speed to contact. When
yeah,
I need something done, the first person that can reach out to me, whether calling me back or I can reach them, is the one that wins.
yeah.
Think as an early stage company, you should be thinking about building tools that are 24/7 and that will give you the fastest speed to contact. And so I think our tools accomplish that even at the SMB and middle tier type levels. These products are certainly built, are affordable and available to that level as well.
Interesting. Um, yeah, the future is really exciting with all this kind of stuff. It's just mind-boggling. Um, so, if somebody's interested in this, how do they become a smart consumer so that when they get the idea, what should they do to prepare to talk to you or whoever they'd be talking to figure out how to use this?
But I think if people aren't starting to use some of these AI tools, it starts there. I mean, I think getting exposed to ChatGPT and all the name brands that are out there today and start leveraging some of that for very simple things, even if it's rewriting your email, but getting used and comfortable around I think is the first step. And the reason I say that is because you're going to go from 1 to 100 with us really quickly, and not everyone's ready for that. And so I think there is a bit of a process that you've got to get some comfort around this. And it starts with doing things that you can relate to in your day-to-day workflow. And so once you gain that comfort and you can see how it's adding value internally, it could be automating a system, it could be automating your response, to a question. Once you start doing that, understanding your customer, their personality, their personas is very important. Understanding the volume of interactions. And, I challenge people to think about the immediate as well. Think about all those hidden costs that you don't think about. When you're hiring someone to go take care of this for you, if you're outsourcing it, they've got to buy a computer, there's a workstation, there's internet connectivity. There's a lot of costs that are involved that we don't think about. And getting down to that level of analysis is really important. So coming to a company like us, I think you've got to be prepared to move quickly because our clients, we turn up operations in 2 to 3 weeks. It's that fast. And we did this in the holidays for a large higher ed company in the middle of Christmas. We converted and made, all these sales for them from contract to starting the program in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Less than 30 days later, they said, "Hey, I want to do everything now with you." But I think you have to be prepared to using this technology so that it's not completely foreign and you've started using it internally a bit and you're gaining some comfort around that. So my best advice is start there.
Yeah. So that kind of leads to when you think about senior leaders today, and the other group is you think about people just starting their careers. What kind of advice do you have for those two groups that
Yeah.
they should be thinking about preparing for, watching out for?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think if you're a leader, replicate what works and build systems that make it repeatable. You don't want to just grow, scale the right things. And if you're building a career, don't try to outpace AI. You won't be able to do that. Learn how to work with it, train it, and make it reflect the best of what you do. So my example of taking some of these tools and using it in your daily life, I think that's true at the leadership level or if you're starting out your career. And we're entering into an area where companies and people who combine emotional intelligence with system thinking will dominate. And those who settle for just being average, they're going to get left behind. And unfortunately, I see a lot of companies that out of fear do not want to embrace this, but their competitors are embracing it. And if they want to compete and they want to survive and to have a business 2, 3 years down the line, then you've got to move beyond that fear and start learning how to make this a part of your daily life.
I'm going to make an assumption, and please challenge me if it's not correct. I believe for a lot of my clients, uh, I think for almost everybody out there, your next major competitor could be somebody that didn't exist last year and is using this kind of technology.
100%. And if I can toot my own horn for a moment, we just won an RFP beating two of the largest companies that are a recognizable brand. I won't say their name because they'll come after me, but we're a young, robust company that's only a few years old. And for us to beat them and to have a solution that was natural, engaging, human sounded, and we allowed that customer to actually engage with the AI, whereas everyone else was doing scripted, little recorded type of, this is what it could look like. That's how you win. And I think companies like us today are able to win and to surpass these large entities because we're much more dynamic, much more fluid, and we're willing to really take a chance and innovate and to really embrace what's happening. We can't win by fear. We have to embrace the inevitable. And I believe AI and where we're heading with technology is inevitable. And those companies that win will embrace this.
It's interesting. I didn't think of this until you just told that story, but anybody who's listened to this podcast for any period of time knows one of the things when you're going to create that revenue culture, if you're really going to maximize your profit, everything you do really needs to emanate from the customer's brain.
Right.
And you need to think about what you do, why you do it, how you do it, from what will be the greatest amount of value possible for the customer. And as I'm listening to you, you're really creating an ability to make that SOP.
That's right. That's right. I think somehow along the way in this journey of wanting to cut costs, we forgot about the customer. We've done everything, unfortunately, to try to avoid speaking to them or creating engaging in environments. And now if we can leverage tools to allow us to put the customer first, to have real conversations with them, I would suggest that that's probably a smarter approach. And your advice couldn't be more golden than that, which is put the customer first in everything that they're doing. You're 100% correct.
One of the tests we give new clients is, do you make money from your customer or with your customer?
Yes.
And you're really and the hard part, a lot of people will say, well, the hard part is I don't really understand my customer that well. They don't always tell me. And what I'm hearing is you're building an opportunity to continually be learning more and more and more, and not only learn it, but validate it.
Yes. Yes. And validate it with industries that may not necessarily be in yours, but have the same problems. So our ultimate goal is to build this marketplace of high performing AI agents that learn and continuously learn and is always ingesting so that a new startup can go and leverage one of our AI agents for their specific use case, but not starting from the beginning, but leveraging all those features and ways of speaking that is preferred, to your customer. And I think that's the opportunity that BrainCX brings to customers is that ability to hit the ground running really, really fast.
Yeah, and continually keep gathering that information and
Yes.
getting smarter and I'm loving where you're going. Um, what you use the term agent all the time, and I'm not sure everybody understands that in maybe the same way you mean it. Tell us when you think of what you're doing with Brain CX, how you conceive of agent in that environment.
Yeah, and I think I probably steal this from the Silicon Valley terminology. You hear a lot about, companies like Microsoft, Salesforce, and so on, building billions of AI agents. But think of it as, and we do not like the word bot. We don't believe that our AI agents are bots in any way, shape, or form. So I hesitate using that term. But in lack of a better term, these are functional products that can actually complete tasks for you. So we use the word agent as something that can complete a task. In our world, that could be a sales agent or a customer service agent or a back office agent that's collecting data and information for you. But an agent in our world is no simpler than a function that's collecting information or completing tasks for you. That's how we think about an agent.
And and I guess this is probably my prejudice spending years in the call center space through the computer aided telephony stuff. Often when I think of agent, and I should know better, but I think of a very low paid person doing a very rote kind of activity. And you're no place near that. You're all over um, additive value, creativity, speed. Am I?
100%. I mean, our AI agents are the highest skilled employee that you'll have in your organization. They have domain knowledge as well as other knowledge that makes them the smartest person in the room. And that allows you to have these high functioning interactions with your customers. And so if you have the smartest person in the room doing that, then your outcome should be greater revenue or better customer satisfaction. So that's sort of how we think about it. And the tendency to think about it as a low skill employee, I think we have to challenge that thinking because this is a high skilled tool that is learning from so many different inputs. Even recognizing something as simple as if you have noise in the background and being able to weed that noise out and hearing clearly what you're saying, understanding your accents and the many different accents that are out there. Just pick one quick example. When someone says they speak Spanish, well, is it Latin American, Mexican, Castilian Spanish? What is the
Yep.
Spanish? But an ability for that AI agent to understand all types of Spanish accents, that's something that a simple frontline employee just can't do.
Well, I'm thinking. I'm imagining, and you can tell me if this is current state or future state, that this could be part of a medical triage, or it could be part of an engineering triage, or all kinds of really skilled positions that today you just got to sit on hold till somebody with skill shows up.
I'll give you a good example. I was assembling a karaoke machine for my wife a few weeks ago, and I couldn't find the directions. I had to find a PDF online, and it was the most frustrating thing. But imagine a world if you can call and have a conversation with a voice AI that can guide you through this. In fact, we built a voice AI for a refrigeration company, and their technicians are able to speak to it. And this AI has ingested all their product manuals, everything that they have in their life cycle. And now this AI could say, look at the bottom right-hand side next to the condenser, the third button over is the problem that you're looking for or that you need to replace. That level of sophistication and guidance, you couldn't train an agent to know all that. That would just take so long to do that. But imagine that we can train that in minutes. So that's sort of the way you need to think about it, is that we are able to really ingest lots of content very, very quickly and really handle very sophisticated interactions. And the troubleshooting example is a great one.
Well, Tariq, I think I could ask you questions all day long, but we're kind of at the time where we need to wrap this up. But I'd like for you to just share whatever you think the audience should be aware of, look forward to, avoid. What's your final wisdom for our audience today?
I think, our company has been built on the principle of excellence. And there's a lot of tools that are coming out there, and everyone wants to get involved. And I encourage you to do that, to start small and iterate. Don't boil the ocean. But I think being able to cut through the noise and to look for companies and partners that have decades of experience is vital. And so there's a lot of startups and a lot of great tools that are being built, but maybe by individuals who haven't really done this extensively, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I certainly believe that companies like ourselves and others that are similar come with that decades of experience that really help you apply this in a meaningful way. I've come from an environment where I've managed $1 million integrations for tools that we just used a fraction of it. And I challenge people not to overspend and to go buy the latest and greatest, sort of like you don't need to go buy, the Ferrari when a high functioning Toyota may be, right for you. And Toyota is a great brand. I own three of them. But the point being is that buy within what you need for your environment, but understand that there is a lot of noise and you've got to cut through that and make sure that the team behind that has that level of experience to deliver on the outcome of it. So I say you know, get off the fear and start trying something, but iterate on it. Start small and build on top of that.
Well, Tariq, I thank you for being here today. This was really interesting, and I hope the audience enjoys it as much as I did.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for the opportunity. There's exciting times ahead for all of us. So I can only imagine a year from now what we'll be talking about.
Well, I think we may have to come back and do this again in a year.
Absolutely.
So for those of you who joined us today, you got a treat, and I hope you're with us for the next one in another 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.